London, 1887. A priceless jewel, the blue carbuncle, vanishes from a locked hotel suite, sparking a mystery that baffles Scotland Yard, when a battered hat and a Christmas goose reveal the gem hidden in its crop. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson unravel a web of greed, deception, and cunning. From foggy markets to grand hotels, they chase a nervous attendant, a scheming maid, and a scarred mastermind to restore the jewel and uncover the truth. Dive into a thrilling tale of crime and deduction where nothing is as it seems. Chapter 1. The Christmas goose. It was the second morning after Christmas, and the fog of London lay heavy upon Baker Street, cloaking the city in a shroud of grey that muffled sound and dimmed the gas lamps to mere smudges of light. I, Dr. John H. Watson, had risen early, stirred by a restlessness born of the season's excesses, and found myself in the familiar sitting room at 2-1B, where the air was thick with the scent of coal smoke and the lingering aroma of Sherlock Holmes's shag tobacco. The fire crackled in the grate, casting long shadows across the cluttered room papers strewn across the table, chemical apparatus glinting in the corner, and the violin case propped carelessly against a chair. Holmes himself lounged in his velvet dressing gown, his long, lean frame folded into the armchair, his fingers steepled before his lips, and his keen grey eyes fixed upon some invisible point beyond the fire. He had been silent for near an hour, a habit I knew well, and one that often presaged the unfolding of some singular problem. I turned from the window, where the fog pressed like a living thing against the panes, and sought to break the quiet. "A dreary day, Holmes," I remarked, settling into my own chair with the morning's Times. "The city seems half asleep, smothered in this mist." Holmes stirred, his gaze shifting to me with that peculiar intensity that could make one feel as though one's very thoughts were laid bare. "Dreary, perhaps, Watson, but never dull. London's fog hides 1,000 secrets, and in such weather, men's deeds good and ill creep forth under cover of shadow. Mark my words, something curious will cross our path before the day is out." I smiled at his penchant for drama, though experience had taught me to heed his predictions. "You expect a case, then? Surely even criminals take respite after Christmas." He waved a dismissive hand. "Crime knows no holiday, my dear Watson. The human heart is never so restless as when the world demands festivity. Greed, envy, desperation, these do not pause for plum pudding." He reached for his pipe, but before he could light it, a sharp rap at the door interrupted us. Mrs. Hudson entered, her face flushed from the cold of the stare. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, it's Peterson, the commissionaire. He's in a state. Says he's got something you must see at once." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Send him up, Mrs. Hudson, and let us see what the fog has brought us." Peterson, a burly man with a weathered face and a uniform slightly askew, appeared moments later, clutching a battered felt hat in one hand and a large, plucked goose under his arm. His breath came in short puffs, as though he had run some distance, and his eyes were wide with a mixture of excitement and bewilderment. "Mr. Holmes." "Sir," he began, "I wouldn't trouble you, but this is queer, and no mistake. Last night, near Tottenham Court Road, I saw a scuffle 4 or 5 roughs set upon a fellow, and he dropped this goose and hat in the street. I chased M off, but the man was gone before I could get his name. I thought to bring M to you, seeing as how you've a knack for such things." Holmes took the hat, turning it over in his hands with the care of a jeweler examining a rare gem. It was a sorry object, its brim frayed, its crown stained with grease, and a faint odor of cheap spirits clung to it. "A most unpromising specimen," he remarked, "yet it may tell us something." "What of the goose, Peterson?" The commissionaire hesitated, then placed the bird on the table. "It's just a goose, sir, though a fine one. I thought to take it home for the wife, but, well, there's something odd about it. I felt a lump in its crop, and when I looked," he trailed off, his ruddy face spelling Holmes's interest sharpened. "A lump, you say? Let us investigate." He took a small knife from his desk, and, with deft precision, slit open the goose's crop. A gasp escaped my lips as he drew forth a small, glittering object, no larger than a pea, yet radiant with a deep cerulean fire that seemed to pulse in the dim light of the room. It was a gem, flawless and extraordinary, its facets catching the firelight like a captured star. "Good heavens, Holmes!" I exclaimed. "What is it?" He held it aloft, his expression one of grim satisfaction. "This, Watson, is the blue carbuncle, stolen 5 days ago from the Countess of Morca's suite at the Hotel Cosmopolitan. A jewel worth the king's ransom. And now, inexplicably, lodged in the crop of a Christmas goose." I stared, my mind struggling to reconcile the absurdity of the situation. Stolen. But why would a thief hide such a treasure in a goose? "That," said Holmes, setting the gem on a velvet cloth, "is the question we shall answer. Peterson, tell me everything you saw last night. Omit no detail, however trivial." Peterson recounted his tale. He had been walking his beat near Tottenham Court Road when he heard a cry and saw a man, middle-aged and bespectacled, set upon by a gang of ruffians. The man had been carrying the goose and hat, both of which he dropped in his haste to flee. Peterson had driven off the attackers, but the victim had vanished into the fog. The hat bore the initials HB inside the band, and the goose, he noted, was unusually heavy for its size. Holmes listened intently, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of his chair. When Peterson finished, Holmes dismissed him with instructions to keep the matter quiet. "And take the goose, Peterson," he added. "It may yet serve as evidence, but I see no harm in your wife roasting it, provided you preserve the remains." As the door closed behind the commissionaire, I turned to Holmes. "This is madness, Holmes. A jewel of such value, hidden in a bird. It defies reason." "Reason," he replied, "is often the last refuge of the unimaginative. The facts are these. The blue carbuncle was stolen, and now it is here, in our sitting room, having passed through the hands of an unknown man named HB and a gang of street toughs. The trail begins with this hat, Watson. Let us see what it tells us." He took up the hat again, his lens moving over its surface with meticulous care. "Observe," he said, "the wear on the brim and even, suggesting a man who handles it carelessly, perhaps in drink. The stains are grease, likely, from hair pomade, but of a cheap variety, indicating modest means. The band is worn thin on one side, as though the wearer frequently rubs his temple, a nervous habit, perhaps, or a sign of recent distress. The initials HB suggest a name, and the size of the hat are 7 3/4. A man of above-average intellect, for head size often correlates with cranial capacity." I chuckled despite myself. "You deduce all this from a hat." "Not deduce," Watson observed. "Deduction follows observation. The hat belongs to a man of limited means, likely a clerk or minor professional, fond of drink, and recently troubled. The initials give us a starting point. I shall consult my index." He crossed to the shelves, where his meticulously organized files held records of London's citizens, from peers to pickpockets. After a moment, he returned with a card. Henry Baker, he read, aged 44, formerly employed as a clerk at the British Museum, dismissed 3 months ago for intemperance. Resides in Camden Town, recently estranged from his wife. A likely candidate for our HB. But how does this connect to the jewel? I asked. Holmes's eyes gleamed. That, my dear Watson, is where the adventure begins. The Goose was no accident. It was chosen as a hiding place, a means to smuggle the carbuncle from the scene of the theft. Our task is to trace its journey backward, from Peterson to Henry Baker, and thence to the thief himself. The remainder of the morning passed in a flurry of activity. Holmes dispatched telegrams to the Hotel Cosmopolitan, requesting details of the theft, and to Scotland Yard, inquiring about suspects. He paced the room, his mind racing, pausing only to scribble notes or consult his maps of London. I, meanwhile, endeavoured to keep pace with his thoughts, though I confess they often eluded me. By noon, a reply arrived from Inspector Bradstreet, confirming the theft's particulars. The blue carbuncle had vanished from a locked case in the Countess's suite, with no sign of forced entry. Suspicion had fallen on a plumber, John Horner, who had been working in the hotel, but evidence was circumstantial at best. Holmes read the message with a frown. Bradstreet is a competent man, but he lacks imagination. A locked room does not mean an impossible crime only. A clever one. He turned to me, his expression alight with purpose. Come, Watson, let us venture into the fog. Our first stop is Covent Garden, where Peterson's Goose likely originated. The market will be bustling, and a dealer in poultry may shed light on this peculiar chain of events. We donned our coats and stepped into the chill of the December day, the fog swirling about us like a living thing. The streets of London were alive with the clatter of hansoms, the cries of vendors, and the muffled footsteps of passers-by, all half seen in the murky air. Holmes strode with his usual vigour, his scarf pulled tight against the cold, and I followed, my mind turning over the strangeness of the case. A jewel hidden in a goose, a battered hat, a man named Henry Baker. Thread connected these disparate elements. I could not yet see it, but I trusted Holmes's unerring instinct to unravel the mystery. At Covent Garden, the market was a riot of colour and noise, despite the fog. Stalls overflowed with winter greens, fruits, and the last of the Christmas poultry, and the air was thick with the scent of roasted chestnuts and damp wool. Holmes made straight for a stall piled high with geese, where a burly man in a stained apron was shouting prices to a crowd of shoppers. Mr. Breckenridge? Holmes inquired, his tone polite but firm. The man turned, his face red from the cold. Aye, that's me. What do you want? I've got customers. A moment of your time, said Holmes, producing the hat. This was found with a goose, dropped in Tottenham Court Road last night. I believe it came from your stall. Breckenridge's eyes narrowed. I sell dozens of geese a day, Mr. Cunt. Keep track of 'em all. What's so special about this one? Holmes leaned closer, his voice low. This goose contained something of value, something that does not belong in a bird's crop. Tell me, where do you source your stock? The dealer's expression darkened, but he answered grudgingly. From the Alpha Inn, near the British Museum. Landlord there Windergate, gets 'im from a farm in Kilburn. That's all I know. Now, if you'll excuse me, Holmes pressed a shilling into his hand. One more question. Has anyone else inquired about a specific goose in the past few days? Breckenridge hesitated, then nodded. "Aye, a fellow came by yesterday, nervous sort, small and weaselly. Said his name was Ryder. Kept asking about a goose he'd ordered special, but I told him I don't keep records of every bird. He left in a huff." Holmes's lips twitched in that faint smile that signaled a breakthrough. "Thank you, Mr. Breckenridge. You have been most helpful." As we left the market, Holmes's pace quickened. "Ryder," he murmured, "a name to conjure with. He is no mere bystander, Watson. The goose was meant for him, or through him. And the jewel's presence in its crop was no accident. To the Alpha Inn, and let us see what Mr. Windigate can tell us." The Alpha Inn was a short cab ride away, a modest establishment with a taproom filled with the hum of conversation and the clink of glasses. The landlord, a jovial man with a florid face, greeted us warmly, though his expression grew wary when Holmes mentioned the goose. "I supply Breckenridge," said Windigate. "Good birds, from Oakley's farm in Kilburn. But I don't know nothing about a specific goose." "Why do you ask?" Holmes's eyes were sharp. "A man named Ryder, was he here, inquiring about a goose?" Windigate nodded slowly. "He was, day before yesterday. Regular here, though not one for much talk. Said he'd ordered a goose for his sister. Wanted to know if it had gone to the right buyer. Seemed awful anxious about it." Holmes exchanged a glance with me. "And did you tell him where it went?" "Told him it was sold to Breckenridge, like all the others. He didn't seem pleased, but he left without a fuss." We thanked Windigate and stepped back into the fog, Holmes's mind clearly racing. "The chain grows clearer, Watson. The goose was procured deliberately, likely by this Ryder, and the jewel placed within it to smuggle it from the hotel. But the plan went awry. Henry Baker received the goose, lost it in the street, and Peterson found it. Our task now is to find Ryder and learn his role in this affair." The day wore on, and Holmes's inquiries led us to a lodging house in Lambeth, where Ryder was said to reside. The place was a grim, narrow building, its halls smelling of damp and cabbage. Ryder was not in, but his landlady described him as a small, nervous man, an attendant at the Hotel Cosmopolitan, who had been increasingly agitated in recent days. "The Hotel Cosmopolitan," I said, as we returned to Baker Street, "the very place where the carbuncle was stolen. Surely this cannot be coincidence." "Coincidence," said Holmes, "is the refuge of the lazy mind. Ryder is our link, Watson. Tomorrow we shall call upon him and see what he knows of geese and jewels." Back in our sitting room, Holmes lit his pipe and sank into his chair, the blue carbuncle gleaming on the table before him. The fog had thickened outside, and the fire cast flickering shadows across his angular face. "A curious case, Watson," he said at last. "A jewel hidden in a goose, a clerk fallen on hard times, a nervous attendant, and a theft without a trace. The threads are many, but they will converge, mark my words." I retired to my room that night with my head spinning, the mystery of the blue carbuncle as dense as the fog that enveloped London. Holmes, I knew, would not rest until every knot was untangled, every secret laid bare, and I, as ever, was content to follow where his genius led, into the heart of the adventure that awaited us. Chapter 2. The trail of the goose. The fog of London had not relented, as Sherlock Holmes and I set out from Baker Street, the chill of the late December afternoon biting through our coats. The city was a labyrinth of shadows, its streets alive, with the clatter of hooves and the muffled cries of vendors, half seen in the murky air. Holmes, his scarf pulled tight and his eyes alight with purpose, led the way toward Covent Garden, where the trail of the mysterious Goose and the blue carbuncle hidden within it had its next link. I followed, my mind still turning over the extraordinary discovery of the jewel, a treasure of such value concealed in so humble a vessel. The absurdity of it gnawed at me. Yet Holmes's unwavering confidence assured me that answers lay within our grasp. "Watson," said he, as our cab rattled through the fog, "consider the ingenuity of this scheme. To hide a gem in a goose is not merely eccentric, it is calculated. The thief sought a means to transport the carbuncle beyond suspicion, trusting that no one would think to dissect a Christmas bird. Yet the plan has faltered, and therein lies our opportunity." "But how did it falter?" I asked. "Henry Baker lost the goose in a scuffle, but who intended him to have it, and why?" Holmes's lips curved in a faint smile. "That is the question, my dear fellow. The goose was no random choice. It was a courier, selected with care. Our task is to trace its path backward, from Baker to the market, and thence to its source. Covent Garden will tell us more. We alighted at the market, where the air was thick with the scents of evergreen, roasted nuts, and the faint tank of poultry. The stalls were a riot of colour, piled high with winter produce and the last of the season's geese, their plucked forms gleaming under the flickering gas lamps. Holmes made straight for the stall of Mr. Breckenridge, the dealer Peterson had named as the source of the goose. The man was a formidable figure, broad-shouldered and red-faced, his apron stained with the day's work. He was barking orders to a lad unloading crates when Holmes approached, his manner courteous but direct. "Mr. Breckenridge," said Holmes, producing the battered hat from beneath his coat, "I believe you sold a goose that was found with this in Tottenham Court Road last night. A matter of some importance hinges on its origin." Breckenridge's eyes narrowed, his hands pausing on a crate. "I sell hundreds of geese, mister," he growled. "Can't keep track of every one. What's so special about this bird?" Holmes leaned closer, his voice low but firm. "This goose contained something unexpected, something that does not belong in a bird's crop. I need to know where it came from and who purchased it." The dealer's face darkened, and for a moment I thought he might refuse to answer. But Holmes's steady gaze seemed to compel him, and he relented with a grunt. "I get my stock from the Alpha Inn, near the British Museum. Landlord there, Windigate, supplies me regular. That's all I know. Now, I've got work to do." Holmes pressed a coin into his hand, a gesture that softened the man's scowl. "One more question," said Holmes. "Has anyone else inquired about a specific goose in the past few days?" Breckenridge scratched his chin, his brow furrowing. Come to think of it, there was a fellow yesterday. Small chap, nervous as a cat, with a face like a weasel. Called himself Ryder. Kept pestering me about a goose he said was meant for someone special. I told him I don't track every bird I sell sent him packing. That's all I know. Holmes's eyes gleamed with that peculiar light that signaled a breakthrough. "Describe this Ryder, if you please." "Short, thin, maybe 30 years old," said Breckenridge. "Wore a threadbare coat, brown hair, twitchy manner. Looked like he hadn't slept in days. Kept muttering about his sister, but I didn't." "Care to listen?" "Thank you, Mr. Breckenridge," said Holmes. "You have been most helpful." As we left the stall, Holmes's pace quickened, his mind clearly racing. "Ryder," he murmured. "The name appears again, Watson. This is no coincidence. He is tied to the goose, and thus to the carbuncle. The Alpha Inn is our next stop. The fog had thickened as we hailed a cab, the driver's lantern casting a feeble glow through the mist. The Alpha Inn was a modest establishment, its windows aglow with the warmth of the taproom within. The scent of ale and tobacco greeted us as we entered, the room filled with the low hum of conversation from working men seeking respite from the cold. Mr. Windigate, the landlord, was a stout, jovial man with a florid face and a ready smile, polishing glasses behind the bar. "Good evening, gentlemen," he said. "What'll it be?" Holmes wasted no time. "Information, Mr. Windigate. You supply geese to Mr. Breckenridge at Covent Garden, do you not?" Windigate's smile faltered, replaced by a wary look. I do. Good birds, from Oakley's farm in Kilburn. What's this about?" "A particular goose," said Holmes. "Sold to Breckenridge, and later found in Tottenham Court Road. It contained something of value, and I must know its provenance." The landlord's eyes widened, but he recovered quickly. "I sell dozens of geese, sir. Hard to say which went where, but Oakley's my supplier, and he's a reliable man. You'd have to ask him for more." Holmes leaned forward, his voice low. "A man named Ryder Small, nervous, perhaps a regular here has. He's spoken of a goose, or shown unusual interest in one." Windigate hesitated, then nodded. "James Ryder, RG. He's been in and out for years. Works at the Hotel Cosmopolitan. Couple of days ago, he was here, all in a lather about a goose he'd ordered for his sister. Said it was special, had to. Go to the right person. I told him it went to Breckenridge with the rest, and he near tore his hair out. Odd, now you mention it. Did he say who the goose was meant for?" Holmes asked. Windigate shook his head. Only that it was for his sister, and he'd paid good money to ensure it reached her. Didn't give a name. Holmes thanked him, and we stepped back into the fog, the cold air sharp against my face. "The Hotel Cosmopolitan," I said, my breath clouding in the chill. "Ryder works there, where the carbuncle was stolen. The connection grows stronger." "Indeed," said Holmes. "The Goose was a vessel, Watson, chosen to carry the jewel from the hotel to a confederate likely this sister Ryder spoke of, though I suspect she's a fiction. The plan miscarried when Henry Baker received the goose and lost it in the street. Ryder's anxiety suggests he knows the jewel's fate or fears it. Our next destination was Kilburn, where Oakley's farm lay on the city's edge. The cab ride was slow, the fog slowing traffic to a crawl, and I took the opportunity to question Holmes further. But why a goose? Why not a bag, a parcel, anything? "Less conspicuous," Holmes chuckled. "Conspicuous, Watson. A goose at Christmas is the least conspicuous thing in London. Every household has one, and no one suspects a bird of carrying a fortune." The thief was clever, but not clever enough to foresee Baker's misfortune. We reached Oakley's farm as dusk fell, the fog giving way to a clear, cold evening. The farm was a modest affair, its fields dotted with pens of squawking poultry. Mr. Oakley, a burly man with a weathered face, greeted us at the gate, his hands stained with earth. Holmes explained our purpose, mentioning the goose and its unusual contents without revealing the jewel's nature. Oakley rubbed his chin, thoughtful. "I sent 24 geese to the Alpha Inn last week," he said. "Good birds, all of them. But one was set aside, now you mention it. A gentleman came by, well-dressed, with a scar on his cheek. Paid me handsomely to ensure one goose went to a specific buyer man named Henry Baker. Said it was a gift, but he was particular about it. I marked the bird with a blue tag, as he asked." Holmes's eyes narrowed. This gentleman, what did he look like, beyond the scar? Tall, lean, maybe 40, said Oakley. Dark coat, polished boots, spoke like a toff, didn't give his name, and I didn't ask. Money was good, and I did as he said. Holmes nodded, his mind clearly turning over this new information. And the Goose with the blue tag, did you see it loaded for the Alpha in? I, said Oakley, went with the rest. Windigate took Emil to Breckenridge. We thanked the farmer and returned to our cab, the stars now visible in the clearing sky. Holmes was silent for a time, his fingers drumming on his knee. A scarred man, he said at last. A well-dressed gentleman orchestrating the delivery of a single goose. This is no petty thief, Watson. The carbuncle's theft was planned with care, and this man is at its heart. Back at Baker Street, Holmes lit his pipe and paced the sitting room, the blue carbuncle gleaming on the table like a beacon. The trail is clear, he said. The goose was procured by this scarred man, placed in the hands of Henry Baker, via Oakley and Windigate, and intended for Ryder or his supposed sister. Baker's loss of the goose was the flaw in their design, and now we hold the prize. Tomorrow we shall seek out Ryder and learn his part in this drama. I retired that night with the mystery pressing upon me, the fog of London mirrored by the fog of the case. A jewel in a goose, a nervous attendant, a scarred gentleman. The pieces were many, but Holmes's relentless logic would surely weave them into a whole. As I drifted to sleep, I heard the faint strains of his violin, a mournful melody that seemed to echo the strangeness of the adventure unfolding before us. Chapter 3. The Alpha in the evening had deepened into a bitter cold as Sherlock Holmes and I made our way through the fog-shrouded streets of London, the gas lamps casting feeble halos that did little to pierce the gloom. The trail of the blue carbuncle, that radiant jewel hidden so improbably in the crop of a Christmas goose, had led us from the bustling chaos of Covent Garden to the Alpha in a modest public house near the British Museum. The name James Ryder, the nervous attendant mentioned by both Breckenridge and Windigate, hung in my mind like a shadow, a thread connecting the stolen gem to the hotel where it had vanished. Holmes, as ever, strode with purpose, his sharp features set in that expression of intense concentration that I had come to know so well. "Watson," he said, as our cab rattled over the cobbles, "we are closing upon the heart of this matter. Ryder is no mere bystander. His anxiety over the goose betrays a deeper involvement. The Alpha in will yield answers, or I am much mistaken." I nodded, though the complexity of the affair still eluded me. But why such an elaborate scheme? If Ryder is involved, why not simply take the jewel and flee? Holmes's eyes glinted in the dim light of the cab. "Because, my dear fellow, the jewel is no ordinary prize. Its value makes it a dangerous burden, too conspicuous to sell, too perilous to keep. The goose was a stroke of cunning, a means to pass it through unsuspecting hands. But plans, however clever, are fragile things, and this one has shattered." We arrived at the Alpha Inn as the clock struck 7, the fog parting just enough to reveal its weathered sign swinging in the wind. The inn was a sturdy, unpretentious place, its windows glowing with the warmth of a fire within. The taproom was crowded with working men clerks, labourers, and the occasional scholar from the nearby museum, their voices mingling in a low hum over the clink of glasses and the scent of ale. Mr. Windigate, the landlord, stood behind the bar, his florid face beaming as he served a pint to a ruddy-cheeked patron. He spotted us at once and waved us over, his smile faltering as he noted Holmes's purposeful stride. "Back again, gentlemen," he said, wiping his hands on his apron. "What's this about now? More talk of geese?" Holmes's tone was brisk. "We require further details, Mr. Windigate, about the goose you supplied to Breckenridge, and about James Ryder. You mentioned his concern for a particular bird. Tell me everything you recall, no matter how trivial." Windigate's brow furrowed, and he leaned closer, lowering his voice to avoid the ears of the patrons nearby. "Ryder's a regular, as I said, been coming here for years. Works at the Hotel Cosmopolitan, some sort of attendant, keeps to himself, mostly. But 2 days ago, he was in a right state, asking about a goose I'd sent to Breckenridge. Said he'd arranged for it to go to his sister, insisted it was marked special. I told him all my geese go to the market, no exceptions, and he got agitated, muttering about how it had to be the right one. Never seen him so worked up." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Did he mention this sister's name, or where she might be found?" "No, sir," said Windigate, shaking his head. "Just kept saying it was for her, and he'd paid good money to see it done. I thought it odd, but folks get particular about their Christmas dinners, so I didn't press him." "And the goose itself," Holmes continued, "did you handle it personally, or notice anything unusual about it?" Windigate scratched his chin. "I don't inspect every bird, but I recall one with a blue tag on its leg came from Oakley's farm, special order, or so he said. I assumed it was for a customer who'd paid extra. It went with the rest to Breckenridge, and that's the last I saw of it." Holmes exchanged a glance with me, his expression unreadable but charged with that quiet intensity that signaled a new piece of the puzzle falling into place. "This blue tag," he said. "Did Ryder mention it specifically?" "Not in so many words," said Windigate, "but he kept asking if I was sure the right goose had gone out, as if he knew it was marked. I told him to take it up with Breckenridge, and he left in a huff." Holmes nodded, his fingers drumming lightly on the bar. "One final question, Mr. Windigate. Has anyone else inquired about this goose, or about Ryder himself?" The landlord hesitated, then leaned closer still. "There was a man, night before last, not a regular. Tall, well-dressed, with a scar on his left cheek, like he'd been cut with a knife. Asked if Ryder had been in, said he was a friend. Didn't give a name, and I didn't like his manner, too sharp, too watchful. He left when I said Ryder wasn't here." Holmes's lips twitched in that faint smile that betrayed his satisfaction. "Thank you, Mr. Windigate. You have been most illuminating." We stepped back into the cold, the fog swirling about us like a living thing. Holmes was silent for a moment, his mind clearly racing. "The scarred man again," he said at last. "First at Oakley's farm, now here. He is the architect of this scheme, Watson, and Ryder is his pawn. The blue tag confirms it. The goose was marked to ensure it reached the right hands, but Henry Baker's misfortune disrupted their plans." I frowned, trying to keep pace with his reasoning. But why involve Baker at all? If Ryder was meant to receive the goose, why not deliver it directly? Holmes chuckled softly. "Because Watson, the thief, sought to distance himself from the crime. Baker was an unwitting courier, chosen for his obscurity, a man unlikely to be suspected, yet easily parted from his prize. The scuffle in Tottenham Court Road was no accident. I wager it was meant to separate Baker from the goose, but the jewel's true destination was lost in the chaos. Our next move was to seek out James Ryder, whose role in this affair grew ever more suspect. Holmes had obtained his address from Windigate lodging house in Lambeth, a grim warren of narrow streets and sagging tenements. The journey took us through the heart of London, the the fog now mingling with the smoke of countless chimneys, creating a haze that stung the eyes and throat. The lodging house was a dilapidated structure, its windows grimy and its door creaking on rusted hinges. The landlady, a gaunt woman with a suspicious gaze, confirmed that Ryder was a tenant but was not, in having left early that morning in a state of evident distress. "He's been like a cat on hot bricks these past few days," she said, clutching her shawl, pacing his room, muttering to himself and jumping at every knock. "Said something about his sister, but I never saw her. If you ask me, he's in some kind of trouble." Holmes thanked her and left a card, requesting that Ryder contact him at once. As we emerged into the street, he turned to me, his eyes alight with purpose. "Ryder is the key, Watson. He knows the jewel's fate, or fears it. His connection to the Hotel Cosmopolitan places him at the scene of the theft, and his obsession with the Goose betrays his complicity. We shall return to Baker Street and await his response, or, failing that, seek him out tomorrow." The cab ride back was silent, Holmes lost in thought, his fingers steepled before him. I pondered the growing web of the case, the scarred man, the marked Goose, Ryder's agitation, and the hapless Henry Baker, caught in a scheme he could not comprehend. The blue carbuncle, that radiant gem, seemed to cast a spell over all who touched it, drawing them into a dance of greed and deceit. Back at Baker Street, the fire had been stoked by Mrs. Hudson, and the sitting room was a haven of warmth against the chill outside. Holmes lit his pipe and settled into his armchair, the carbuncle gleaming on the table before him like a blue flame. "The Alpha Inn has served us well," he said, exhaling a cloud of smoke. "We have a name, a description, and a motive. The scarred man is our quarry, but Ryder is the link we must seize. Tomorrow, Watson, we shall tighten the net." I retired that night with the mystery pressing upon me, the fog of London mirrored by the fog of the case. The Alpha Inn had revealed much, but the heart of the affair remained elusive. As I drifted to sleep, I heard Holmes pacing the floor below, his restless energy a reminder that the adventure of the blue carbuncle was far from over. Chapter 4. The man named Baker. The morning following our visit to the Alpha Inn dawned with a sharpness that cut through the lingering fog, the pale winter sun casting long shadows across the frost-dusted streets of London. In the sitting room, at 2-1B Baker Street, the fire crackled with renewed vigor, and Sherlock Holmes sat at his desk, the blue carbuncle gleaming before him like a fragment of captured sky. The battered felt hat, that forlorn relic of the mysterious Henry Baker, rested beside it, its frayed brim and stained crown a mute testament to the strange path this case had taken. I, Dr. John Watson, had just finished my breakfast when Holmes, with that restless energy that marked his pursuit of a puzzle, turned to me. His grey eyes alight with purpose. "Watson," said he, "the trail of the Goose has led us to James Ryder, a man whose agitation betrays his guilt, and to a scarred gentleman who orchestrated this affair from the shadows. But Henry Baker, the unwitting bearer of the jewel, remains a cipher. Today, we shall summon him and see what light he sheds upon this tangled web." I nodded, though I could not help but wonder at the significance of so ordinary a figure. "You believe Baker is innocent, then, a mere pawn in this scheme?" Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Innocence is a relative term, my dear fellow, but I suspect Baker is no mastermind. His hat speaks of a man fallen on hard times, and his loss of the Goose suggests he was not privy to its secret. Yet he is a link in the chain, and even the humblest link may hold the key to the whole." He had already dispatched a note to Baker, whose address in Camden Town had been gleaned from his index of London's lesser-known souls. The message, sent via Peterson, the commissionaire, requested Baker's presence at Baker Street on a matter concerning his lost property. As we awaited his arrival, Holmes paced the room, his long fingers clasped behind his back, his mind clearly turning over the intricacies of the case. The blue carbuncle, its deep azure glow catching the morning light, seemed to mock our ignorance, a silent challenge to unravel its journey from the Hotel Cosmopolitan to a Goose's crop at 10:30. A knock at the door announced our visitor. Mrs. Hudson ushered in a man whose appearance matched the tale. Told by his hat, Henry Baker was of middle age, with a stoop to his shoulders and a face marked by lines of care. His spectacles were slightly askew, his coat threadbare at the cuffs, and his hands trembled faintly as he clutched the familiar felt hat now returned to him. His eyes, pale and watery, darted nervously between Holmes and me, betraying a man unaccustomed to such scrutiny. "Mr. Holmes," he stammered, his voice thin, "your note said you had news of my goose." I meant no trouble, sir. It was a gift, you see, and I was set upon in the street. I'd be glad to have it back, if it's not too much bother." Holmes gestured to a chair, his manner gentle but incisive. "Pray, sit, Mr. Baker. The goose is safe with Peterson, our commissionaire, but I have questions about its origin. Tell me, how did you come by it?" Baker sat, his fingers worrying the brim of his hat. "It was a gift, sir, from a friend at the Alpha Inn. I am a member of their Goose Club. You see, $1 a week, and at Christmas each man gets a bird. I collected mine 3 days ago, but as I walked home, some roughs set upon me near Tottenham Court Road. I dropped the goose and ran cowardly, perhaps, but I'm no fighter, sir." Holmes leaned forward, his gaze piercing. This friend at the Alpha Inn, who was he, and why did he choose you for such a gift? Baker's eyes flickered with unease. I don't rightly know his name, sir. A fellow I met at the inn. Tall, well-spoken, with a scar on his cheek. He said he'd paid for an extra goose and had no use for it, so he gave it to me. I thought it kind, but I didn't ask questions. Times have been hard since I lost my place at the museum. I glanced at Holmes, the mention of the scarred man confirming our suspicions. "The British Museum, was it?" Holmes asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "What was your work there?" Baker's shoulders sagged. "I was a clerk in the antiquities department, copying manuscripts and cataloguing artifacts. But I took to drink after my wife left, and they let me go 3 months ago. I've been scraping by since, taking odd jobs where I can." Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. "And this goose, did you notice anything unusual about it? A blue tag on its leg, perhaps?" Baker frowned, his brow creasing. "A tag? I don't recall, sir. It was a fine bird, heavy, but I didn't look closely. I meant to roast it for Christmas, but then those ruffians." His voice trailed off, and he shook his head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Holmes. I don't know why you're asking all this. Was the goose stolen?" Holmes's smile was enigmatic. "Not stolen, Mr. Baker, but of great interest. One final question. Did anyone else approach you about the goose, or inquire after it since you lost it?" Baker shook his head vehemently. "No, sir. Only your note this morning. I swear, I've no idea what's so special about it." Holmes rose, signaling the interview's end. "Thank you, Mr. Baker. You have been most helpful. The goose will be returned to you, though I advise you to examine it carefully before cooking. Peterson will see to it." As Baker left, clutching his hat and murmuring thanks, I turned to Holmes. "He seems genuine, Holmes. A man caught in circumstances beyond his understanding." "Indeed," said Holmes, lighting his pipe and settling back into his chair. "Baker is no criminal, but a tool chosen for his obscurity and his misfortune. The scarred man selected him deliberately, knowing a disgraced clerk would attract little notice. The Goose was meant to pass through his hands to another, likely rider, but the scuffle in the street disrupted the plan." I frowned, the pieces of the puzzle still elusive. But why involve Baker at all? Why not give the Goose directly to Ryder? Holmes exhaled a cloud of smoke, his eyes narrowing. "Because, Watson, the scarred man sought to obscure the trail. By passing the jewel through an innocent intermediary, he ensured that suspicion would not fall immediately upon Ryder or himself. Baker was a screen, a buffer between the theft and its true destination. The ruffians, I suspect, were hired to relieve him of the Goose, but their clumsiness allowed it to fall into Peterson's hands. He crossed to his desk, where the blue carbuncle lay, its facets catching the firelight. "Consider the sequence," he continued. "The jewel is stolen from the Hotel Cosmopolitan, hidden in a goose marked with a blue tag, and delivered to Baker via the Alpha Inn. Ryder, an attendant at the hotel, grows anxious when the Goose goes astray. The scarred man, our mastermind, oversees it all. The question now is, who is he, and what is Ryder's true role?" Holmes's index, that vast repository of London's denizens, yielded no immediate match for the scarred man, though he noted several known fencers and jewel thieves who might fit the description. "We need more data," he said, closing the volume with a snap. "Ryder is our next step. His agitation suggests he knows the jewel's fate, or fears its discovery. We shall visit him tomorrow at the Hotel Cosmopolitan, where the trail began." The day passed in quiet anticipation, Holmes alternating between his pipe and his violin, the latter producing a series of plaintive notes that seemed to echo the mystery itself. I, meanwhile, pondered Baker's tailor-man broken by circumstance, unwittingly entangled in a scheme of extraordinary cunning. The blue carbuncle, that radiant gem, seemed to cast a long shadow, drawing all who touched it into its orbit of intrigue. As evening fell, Holmes paused his playing and turned to me, the carbuncle in his hand. "A curious case, Watson," he said, his voice low. "A jewel hidden in a goose, a clerk fallen from grace, a nervous attendant, and a scarred man pulling the strings. The net is tightening, but we must tread carefully. Tomorrow we shall confront Ryder and see what truths he hides." I retired that night with the weight of the adventure pressing upon me, the fog of London now a distant memory, yet the fog of the case as dense as ever. Henry Baker had been revealed as a pawn, but the game was far from over, and Holmes's relentless pursuit of the truth would surely lead us deeper into the heart of the mystery. Chapter 5. The Hotel Cosmopolitan. The morning sun struggled through the haze of London's winter sky as Sherlock Holmes and I set forth for the Hotel Cosmopolitan, the scene of the blue carbuncle's audacious theft. The air was sharp with frost, and the streets bustled with the restless energy of a city recovering from its Christmas revels. Holmes, clad in his long ulster and with his deerstalker pulled low, walked with that purposeful stride that betrayed his anticipation of a breakthrough. I, Dr. John Watson, felt the weight of the mystery pressing upon me, the jewel hidden in a goose, the hapless Henry Baker, the nervous James Ryder, and the shadowy scarred man orchestrating it all. The Hotel Cosmopolitan, with its gilded facade and whispered scandals, promised to yield the next piece of this intricate puzzle. "Watson," said Holmes, as our cab wove through the throng of hansoms and omnibuses, "the theft of the blue carbuncle was no crude burglary. A locked case, no signs of forced entry, and a jewel spirited away under the noses of the hotel staff. This speaks of cunning and access. Ryder's presence at the hotel places him at the heart of the affair, but I suspect he is a tool, not the mastermind." I nodded, my mind turning over the facts. "You believe the scarred man is the true architect, then? But how did he gain entry to the Countess's suite?" Holmes's eyes gleamed. "That, my dear fellow, is what we shall discover. The Hotel Cosmopolitan is a stage, and its players' staff, guests, and intruders will reveal their roles, willingly or not. We arrived at the hotel, a grand edifice of marble and glass that loomed over the Strand like a monument to opulence. Its lobby was a whirl of activity. Porters scurried with luggage. Ladies in furs glided toward the tear room, and a liveried doorman eyed us with polite suspicion. Holmes, with his air of quiet authority, secured an audience with the manager, Mr. Hargreave, who received us in a plush office adorned with mahogany and velvet. He was a portly man, his face creased with the strain of maintaining the hotel's reputation amidst the scandal of the theft. "Mr. Holmes," said Hargreave, adjusting his pince-nez, "I trust you have news of the blue carbuncle. The Countess of Mercar is beside herself, and the police have been maddeningly slow. Inspector Bradstreet suspects a plumber, John Horner, but I cannot believe it. Horner has worked here for years, a steady man." Holmes's expression remained impassive. "Tell me, Mr. Hargreave, the details of the theft. Omit nothing, however trivial." The manager recounted the facts. 5 days prior, the Countess had discovered the carbuncle missing from a locked jewel case in her suite on the 3rd floor. The case, secured with a complex lock, showed no signs of tampering. Horner had been repairing pipes in an adjacent room that day, and a maid had seen him near the suite, leading to his arrest. Yet no trace of the jewel had been found, and Horner protested his innocence with convincing fervor. Holmes listened, his fingers steepled before him. Who else had access to the suite? Staff, visitors, anyone at all? Hargreave hesitated. Only the Countesses, maid Catherine Cusack, and the usual hotel staff cleaners, porters, and the like. Cusack has been with the Countess for years, utterly devoted. I cannot imagine her involved. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Devotion is a fine mask for deceit, Mr. Hargreave. I should like to see the suite, and then speak with Miss Cusack and any staff who were on duty that day. The manager led us to the 3rd floor, where the Countess's suite overlooked the bustling Strand. The rooms were lavish, with silk draperies and polished furniture, a stark contrast to the grim affair we investigated. Holmes examined the jewel case, a small but sturdy box of ebony and brass, its lock intact. He moved to the windows, his lens tracing the sills and frames, then knelt to inspect the carpet, his fingers brushing the pile with meticulous care. No scratches, no marks, he murmured. The thief entered with a key or was already inside. The lock is a chub, difficult but not impossible to pick, though I see no evidence of such. The window is secure, and the lead shows no disturbance. This was an inside job, Watson, or one, executed with intimate knowledge of the hotel. Hargreave bristled. I assure you, Mr. Holmes, our staff are thoroughly vetted. Holmes's smile was thin. No one is beyond suspicion, sir. Now, where might we find Miss Cusack? The maid was summoned, a woman of middle age, with a prim demeanor and eyes that darted nervously as Holmes introduced himself. She stood in the suite's sitting room, her hands clasped tightly, her face pale beneath her starched cap. Miss Cusack, said Holmes, his tone gentle but probing, you were in the Countess's service when the carbuncle was stolen. Tell me your movements that day, and what you observed. Cusack's voice was steady, though her fingers betrayed her unease. I was with her ladyship most of the day, sir, tending to her wardrobe and correspondence. I left the suite briefly in the afternoon to fetch tea from the kitchen. When I returned, the Countess was in a state. The jewel case was open, and the carbuncle gone. I swear I know nothing of it. Holmes's gaze was unrelenting. Did you see John Horner, the plumber, near the suite? Yes, sir, she said, hesitating. He was in the corridor, working on a pipe. But he's a good man, always polite. I can't believe he'd steal. And James Ryder? Holmes asked, his voice sharp. What of him? Cusack's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing her face before she masked it. Mr. Ryder, he's an attendant here, runs errands. For the guests, I saw him that day, delivering linens to the floor below. He's a nervous sort, always fidgeting, but I don't know him well. Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. Thank you, Miss Cusack. That will be all for now. As she left, Holmes turned to me, his voice low. She knows more than she says, Watson. That pause when I mentioned Ryder fear, not surprise. She is either complicit or protecting someone. We must find Ryder himself. Hargreave, who had lingered anxiously, offered to summon Ryder, but a quick inquiry revealed he was not on duty that day. His absence, coupled with Cusack's unease, only deepened Holmes's suspicion. Ryder is avoiding us, he said as we left the suite. His lodging in Lambeth will be our next stop. But first, let us consult Bradstreet. He may have overlooked something in his focus on Horner. We found Inspector Bradstreet at Scotland Yard, his desk cluttered with reports on the theft. Was a sturdy man, his face lined with the weariness of one who wrestled daily with London's underbelly. Holmes, he said, rising, I hope you've better luck than we have. Horner's our man, I'm sure, but we've no proof beyond his presence near the suite. The Countess is pressing for results, and the papers are having a field day. Holmes's eyes gleamed with quiet disdain. Horner is innocent. The theft required finesse, not the clumsy opportunism of a plumber. Tell me, what do you know of James Ryder and Catherine Cusack? Bradstreet frowned. Ryder, just a hotel lackey, nervous fellow, no record of trouble. Cusack's, the Countess's maid, been with her for years. Spotless reputation, far as we know. Why? Holmes did not answer directly. Examine Cusack's movements more closely, Inspector, and if Ryder appears, detain him. He is central to this affair, though he may not act alone. We left Scotland Yard and headed for Lambeth, the fog creeping back as evening fell. Ryder's lodging house was as grim as before, its halls echoing with the cries of children and the clatter of pots. The landlady, her suspicion undimmed, confirmed that Ryder had not returned since morning, though she added a new detail. A tall man with a scarred cheek had called for him the previous evening, leaving no name. The scarred man again, I said as we emerged into the cold. He haunts this case like a spectre. Holmes's face was grim. He is no spectre, Watson, but a man of flesh and purpose. He is the mind behind the theft, and Ryder his reluctant instrument. Cusack, too, may be entangled, though her role remains unclear. We shall return to Baker Street and await Ryder's move he cannot hide forever. Back in our sitting room, the fire cast flickering shadows across the blue carbuncle, its azure glow a silent taunt. Holmes lit his pipe and sank into his armchair, his mind a whirl of calculation. "The Hotel Cosmopolitan has given us much," he said. "A maid who falters under questioning, an attendant who flees, and a scarred man who binds them all. The net draws tighter, Watson, but the quarry is wary. Tomorrow we shall force Ryder's hand." I retired that night with the mystery pressing. Heavier than ever, the opulence of the Hotel Cosmopolitan a stark contrast to the dark currents running beneath it. The blue carbuncle, a jewel of breathtaking beauty, had woven a web of deceit, and Holmes alone seemed poised to unravel it. Chapter 6. The nervous attendant. The chill of the London morning clung to the streets as Sherlock Holmes and I ventured forth from Baker Street. The lingering fog, now a thin veil that softened the edges of the city's grim contours. The trail of the blue carbuncle, that radiant jewel hidden within a Christmas goose, had grown ever more intricate, weaving through the hapless Henry Baker, the bustling Alpha Inn, and the opulent Hotel Cosmopolitan. Yet it was James Ryder, the nervous attendant, whose name had surfaced repeatedly, who now held our focus. His agitation, noted by both the landlord Windigate and the market dealer Breckenridge, marked him as a pivotal figure in this curious affair, and Holmes's determination to confront him was palpable as we made our way to his lodging in Lambeth. "Watson," said Holmes, as our cab rattled through the waking city, "Ryder is the fulcrum upon which this mystery turns. His fear betrays knowledge, if not guilt, and his connection to the Hotel Cosmopolitan places him at the theft's heart. We must tread carefully. He is a man on the edge, and a cornered creature is unpredictable." I nodded, my mind grappling with the puzzle's complexity. But if Ryder is involved, why his panic over the goose? Surely he would know where it went. Holmes's eyes glinted with that familiar spark of insight. "Precisely, my dear fellow. His panic suggests the plan has gone awry, and he fears exposure. The goose was meant to carry the carbuncle to safety, but Henry Baker's loss of it has thrown Ryder into disarray. Today, we shall learn what he hides." The lodging house in Lambeth stood as bleak as it had the previous day, its sagging facade and grimy windows a testament to the hard lives within. The landlady, a sharp-eyed woman wrapped in a threadbare shawl, greeted us with the same suspicion, though her tones softened when Holmes produced a shilling. "Ryder's in," she said, jerking her thumb toward the stairs. "Came back late. Last night, looking like death. 3rd floor, 2nd door. Mind you, he's not himself jumpy as a hare." We ascended the creaking stairs, the air heavy with the smells of damp plaster and boiled cabbage. Holmes knocked sharply on Ryder's door, and after a moment's silence, a tremulous voice called, "Who's there?" "Sherlock Holmes." He replied, his tone firm but calm. "I have questions about a goose, Mr. Ryder, and a certain jewel. Open the door, if you please." A scuffle sounded within, followed by the scrape of a bolt. The door opened to reveal James Ryder, a small, wiry man with a pinched face and eyes that darted like a trapped animal's. His brown hair was disheveled, his shirt collar askew, and his hands trembled as he gripped the doorframe. "Mr. Holmes," he stammered, I don't know what you mean. I've done nothing wrong." Holmes stepped forward, his presence filling the cramped room. "Calm yourself, Mr. Ryder. Lies will not serve you. The blue carbuncle, stolen from the Countess of Mercar, was found in a goose you were most anxious to trace. Speak plainly, and you may yet avoid the gallows." Ryder's face drained of colour, and he staggered back, collapsing onto a rickety chair. The room was sparse: a narrow bed, a chipped washstand, and a single window overlooking the sooty rooftops of Lambeth. His eyes flicked to the door, as if contemplating flight. But Holmes's steady gaze held him fast. "I swear, sir," Ryder whispered, "I didn't steal it. I only helped move it. I never meant for any of this." Holmes sat opposite him, his expression unyielding. "Begin at the beginning, Mr. Ryder. Tell me everything, and omit no detail. Your freedom depends on your candor." Ryder's hands twisted in his lap, his voice barely above a whisper. "It started a month ago, at the hotel. I'm just an attendant, running errands, carrying bags. But I got into debt cards, you see, and a man I owed came calling. Tall fellow, with a scar on his cheek. He knew things about me, things I didn't want told. Said he'd clear my debts if I helped him with a job. I leaned forward, my heart quickening, the scarred man again, the shadow behind the theft. Holmes's face remained impassive, but his eyes burned with intensity. "Go on," he said. Ryder swallowed hard. He didn't say what at first, only that I was to watch the Countess's suite and report on her maid, Catherine Cusack. I did. As he asked told him when Cusack was alone, when the Countess was out. Then, 5 days ago, he came to me with a plan. The carbuncle was in a locked case in the suite, but Cusack had a key. He said she'd help him for a price, and my job was to get the jewel out of the hotel. "How?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity. Ryder's eyes dropped to the floor. "The goose. He gave me one, already plucked, with a blue tag on its leg. Said to take it to the Alpha Inn and make sure it reached a man named Henry Baker through their goose club. Cusack slipped the jewel into the goose's crop when no one was looking, and I took it to the inn. The plan was for Baker to carry it out, and someone else would collect it from him later. I didn't know who, only that it was all arranged." Holmes's fingers drummed lightly on his knee. "And when did you learn the goose was lost?" Ryder's voice broke. 2 days ago, I went to the Alpha Inn to check, and Wintergate said it had gone to Breckenridge. I tracked it to Covent Garden, but Breckenridge swore he didn't know which goose was which. I panicked. Cy knew the jewel was in it, and if it was found, I'd be done for. I've been running ever since, trying to find it." Holmes leaned closer, his voice cold. "This scarred man, who is he, and where may he be found?" "I don't know his name," Ryder cried, his hands clutching his hair. "He came to me at the hotel, always at night, always alone. Tall, well-dressed, with a voice like a gentleman. The scar was on his left cheek, deep, like a knife cut. He said if I spoke of him, he'd ruin me or worse." Holmes rose, his expression grim. "You have been foolish, Mr. Ryder, but not irredeemable. Stay here, and speak to no one until I return. Your silence may yet save you." We left the trembling man and stepped back into the chill of Lambeth, the fog now a faint mist that clung to the cobblestones. Holmes was silent as we hailed a cab, his mind clearly racing. "Ryder is a pawn," he said at last, caught between fear and greed. "The scarred man is our true quarry, and Catherine Cusack his accomplice within the hotel. Her role in placing the jewel in the goose confirms her complicity, though I suspect she acts under duress or temptation." I frowned, the pieces of the puzzle shifting in my mind. But why such a convoluted plan? Why not smuggle the jewel out directly? Holmes's smile was thin. Because, Watson, the carbuncle's value makes it a dangerous prize. To carry it openly risks detection. To hide it in a goose, pass through innocent hands, obscures the trail. The scarred man chose Baker as a decoy, knowing his obscurity would deflect suspicion. But Baker's loss of the goose and Peterson's discovery have undone their scheme. Back at Baker Street, Holmes lit his pipe and paced the sitting room, the blue carbuncle gleaming on the table like a beacon of truth. "We have advanced, Watson," he said, exhaling a cloud of smoke. "Ryder's confession confirms the theft's mechanics, but the scarred man remains elusive. Tomorrow we shall confront Cusack and press her for his identity. The net is closing, but we must act swiftly." I retired that night with the weight of Ryder's fear lingering in my mind. His pinched face and trembling hands, a stark reminder of the stakes. The blue carbuncle, a jewel of breathtaking beauty, had drawn a web of deceit around all who touched it. And Holmes's relentless pursuit of the truth was our only guide through its shadows. Chapter 7. The confession. The fog had lifted from London's streets, replaced by a biting wind that swept through the narrow alleys of Lambeth, as Sherlock Holmes and I stood outside James Ryder's lodging house. The morning was raw, the sky a leaden grey, and the air carried the sharp temps of coal smoke and river damp. Ryder's tremulous confession, wrung from him in the dim confines of his room, still echoed in my mind his tale of debts, a scarred man's coercion, and a goose bearing the blue carbuncle. Holmes, his eyes alight with the hunter's zeal, had left Ryder with a stern injunction to remain silent. And now our path led back to the heart of the mystery, the Hotel Cosmopolitan, where the jewel had been stolen and where Catherine Cusack, the Countess's maid, awaited our scrutiny. "Watson," said Holmes, as our cab rattled toward the Strand, "Ryder's fear is our lever. He is a weak link, broken by the weight of his own guilt. Cusack, however, may prove more formidable. If she is the scarred man's confederate, as Ryder's story suggests, she will not yield easily. We must press her carefully, lest she slip our grasp." I frowned, the intricacy of the affair weighing upon me. Ryder's confession explains the goose, but not the theft itself. How did Cusack obtain the jewel, and why risk such a scheme? Holmes's lips curved in a faint smile. "Greed, Watson, or perhaps desperation. The carbuncle's value could tempt even the most loyal servant, and the scarred man's influence suggests a mind skilled in manipulation. Cusack's role was to secure the jewel and conceal it in the goose, trusting Ryder to deliver it to Baker. The plan was clever, but its complexity was its downfall. We arrived at the Hotel Cosmopolitan as the morning trade swelled. The lobby, a whirl of fur-clad ladies, harried porters, and the low hum of wealth. Mr. Hargreave, the manager, met us with a strained expression, his pince-nez glinting in the chandelier light. "Mr. Holmes," he said, "I hope you bring progress. The Countess grows more insistent, and the police are no closer to finding the carbuncle." Holmes's tone was brisk. "We are closer than you know, Mr. Hargreave. I must speak with Catherine Cusack at once, in private. And I trust you have kept John Horner's detention in mind. He is innocent of this crime." Hargreave's brow furrowed, but he nodded and sent for Cusack. We were shown to a small parlour off the main corridor, its walls adorned with gilt-framed landscapes and its air heavy with the scent of polished wood. Cusack appeared moments later, her prim demeanour intact but her eyes wary, like those of a deer sensing a predator. She was a woman of middle years, her dark hair neatly pinned beneath her cap, her hands clasped tightly before her starched apron. "Miss Cusack," Holmes began, his voice smooth but edged with steel, "we have spoken with James Ryder. He has told us of the Goose, the jewel, and your part in this affair. The blue carbuncle is in my possession, and denial will serve you ill. Speak the truth, and you may yet find leniency." Cusack's face paled, her lips parting in a silent gasp, but she quickly mastered herself. "I don't know what you mean, Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice steady but strained. "I am the Countess's maid, nothing more. Ryder is a nervous fool, whatever he's said. It's no concern of mine." Holmes leaned forward, his gaze unrelenting. "Come, Miss Cusack. Ryder has confessed to delivering a goose to the Alpha. In a goose you placed the carbuncle within. He spoke of a scarred man who orchestrated the theft, and your role in securing the jewel from the Countess's case. Lie to me, and you will face Inspector Bradstreet's cuffs." Her composure cracked, a tremor running through her hands. She sank into a chair, her eyes darting to the door as if seeking escape. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I had no choice. He threatened me, said he'd ruin me if I didn't help." Holmes's expression softened, though his eyes remained sharp. "The scarred man, tell me of him and of your actions. The truth, Miss Cusack, is your only refuge." She drew a shuddering breath, her voice low and halting. "It began 6 weeks ago. I was in debt, my brother. He's ill, and the doctor's bills were more than I could manage. I'd borrowed from a man in the city, a gentleman, or so he seemed. Tall, with a scar on his cheek, and a voice that could charm or terrify. He came to me at the hotel, said he knew of my troubles, and offered to clear my debts if I helped him. He wanted the blue carbuncle. I listened, my heart quickening at the confirmation of the scarred man's role." Holmes sat motionless, his fingers steepled before him. "Go on," he said. Cusack's eyes dropped to her lap. "The Countess trusted me with the key to her jewel case. She's careless, always leaving things about. The man told me to take the carbuncle and hide it in a goose he'd provide. I thought it mad, but he said it was the only way to move it safely. I did as he asked, slipped the jewel into the goose's crop when the Countess was at dinner. Ryder was to take it to the Alpha Inn, where it would go to a man named Henry Baker. The scarred man said Baker would never know what he carried, and someone else would collect it later. And when the goose was lost?" Holmes asked, his voice low. Cusack's hands twisted together. "I heard from Ryder 2 days later. He was frantic, said Baker had lost the goose in the street. I didn't know what to do. The scarred man came to me that night, furious, demanding to know where the jewel was. I told him it was gone, and he struck me, said I'd pay if it wasn't found. I've been terrified ever since." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "This man, his name, his whereabouts?" "I don't know his name," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "He called himself Mr. Brown once, but I don't know if it's true. He's tall, lean, with dark eyes and that scar, like a blade's mark. I saw him last near the docks 2 nights ago. He said he was leaving London, but I don't know where." Holmes rose, his expression grim. "You have done well to speak, Miss Cusack. Remain here and say nothing to anyone. Your part in this will be weighed, but your candor may spare you the worst." We left the parlor, Cusack's stifled sobs echoing. Behind us, Hargreave, waiting anxiously outside, looked to Holmes for answers, but Holmes waved him off. "Inform Inspector Bradstreet that Cusack must be watched. but not yet arrested," he said, "and ensure John Horner is released. Is innocent, as I told you." As we stepped into the cold of the Strand, I turned to Holmes, my mind reeling. Cusack's confession ties the threads together, but this scarred man Brown, if that's his name, remains a ghost. How will we find him? Holmes's face was set, his eyes distant. The docks, Watson, Cusack's mention of them is no accident. A man like Brown, with a jewels theft on his hands, will seek to flee where the carbuncle can be sold, and Starburn, perhaps, or Antwerp, where gem markets thrive. We must act swiftly before he slips beyond our reach. Back at Baker Street, Holmes summoned his network of informants, the Baker Street irregulars, with a note sent via Billy, the page boy. "Find a tall man with a scarred cheek near the docks," he instructed. "Report any sighting, no matter how fleeting." He then lit his pipe and paced the sitting room, the blue carbuncle gleaming on the table like a taunting star. "The confession is a step, Watson," he said, exhaling. "A cloud of smoke. Cusack and Ryder are pawns, driven by debt and fear. Brown is the mind, the hand that wove this scheme. The Goose was his masterstroke, but its loss has undone him. Tomorrow we hunt the hunter." I retired that night with the weight of Cusack's fear and Ryder's desperation heavy upon me. The blue carbuncle, a jewel of unearthly beauty, had ensnared them all in its web, and only Holmes's relentless logic could hope to cut through the shadows that surrounded it. Chapter 8. The Maid's Deception. The morning broke with a crisp clarity, the fog that had shrouded London giving way to a pale winter sun that cast long shadows across the frost-kissed streets. In the sitting room at 221B Baker Street, the fire crackled with a steady warmth, and the blue carbuncle gleamed on Sherlock Holmes's desk, its azure facets catching the light like a frozen flame. I, Dr. John Watson, sat with my coffee, my mind still reeling from James Ryder's trembling confession and the intricate web of deceit surrounding the stolen jewel. Holmes, clad in his dressing gown, paced with that restless energy that signaled his mind was racing, piecing together the threads of the case, Henry Baker's unwitting role, Ryder's fearful complicity, and now Catherine Cusack's pivotal part as the Countess's maid. Our next step was clear. We must return to the Hotel Cosmopolitan to confront Cusack again, armed with Ryder's testimony and the weight of the jewel itself. "Watson," said Holmes, pausing to light his pipe, "Cusack's confession yesterday was a half-truth, a performance designed to shield her deeper involvement. She admitted to placing the carbuncle in the Goose, but her claim of coercion by this scarred man Brown, as she called him, lacks the ring of candor. Today we shall press her harder and unravel the deception she weaves." I frowned, setting down my cup. "You doubt her story?" She seemed genuinely frightened, Holmes. Her tears, her trembling, surely that was no act. Holmes's eyes glinted with a cold amusement. "Fear can be as much a tool as a confession, my dear fellow. Cusack is no mere pawn. She had access to the Countess's key, the means to execute the theft with precision. Her story of debt and threats may be true in part, but I suspect she played a more active role than she admits. We must catch her off guard before she can refine her tale." We set out for the Hotel Cosmopolitan, the city alive with the clatter of carts and the cries of newsboys hawking the morning's headlines. The hotel's gilded facade loomed as we approached, its grandeur a stark contrast to the dark currents of greed and betrayal running beneath its surface. Mr. Hargreave, the manager, met us in the lobby, his face etched with the strain of the ongoing scandal. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice low, "the Countess is pressing for answers, and the police are hounding me. Have you found the carbuncle?" Holmes's tone was brisk. "The jewel is safe, Mr. Hargreave, and the truth is near. I must speak with Catherine Cusack at once, alone. Ensure we are not disturbed." Hargreave nodded, his pince-nez slipping as he hurried to summon the maid. We were shown to the same parlour as before, its polished wood and velvet upholstery a silent witness to the unfolding drama. Cusack entered moments later, her prim demeanour intact but her eyes wary, like those of a fox scenting a trap. She stood stiffly, her hands clasped before her apron, her face pale but composed. "Miss Cusack," Holmes began, his voice smooth yet edged with authority, "yesterday you admitted to placing the blue carbuncle in a goose at the behest of a scarred man you called Brown. James Ryder has since confirmed his role in delivering that goose, but his account suggests you were no reluctant accomplice. The time for half-truths is over. Speak plainly, or face the consequences." Cusack's lips tightened, and for a moment I thought she would maintain her defiance. But Holmes's unrelenting gaze seemed to pierce her resolve, and she sank into a chair, her hands trembling. "You don't understand, Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice low and strained. "I had no choice at first. But yes, I wanted more. The jewel, it could have changed everything." Holmes leaned forward, his expression unyielding. "Begin at the beginning, Miss Cusack. How did this scheme take shape, and what was your true part in it?" She drew a shuddering breath, her eyes fixed on the floor. "It started months ago. I was drowning in debt, my brother's illness, the bills piling up. I borrowed from a man in the city, a lender who knew how to twist the knife. He called himself Silas Brown, tall, with a scar on his cheek, like a blade's mark. He came to me at the hotel, said he'd clear my debts if I helped him steal the carbuncle. The Countess was careless, always leaving her key in her dressing table. It was easy to take it, to copy it. I listened, my heart quickening at the name Silas Brown, the scarred man, at last given a title, however suspect. Holmes's face remained impassive, but his eyes burned with intensity. "Go on," he said. Cusack's voice grew quieter, as if the weight of her words pressed upon her. "Brown planned it all. He said the jewel had to leave the hotel without suspicion, so he brought the goose already plucked, with a blue tag. I took the carbuncle from the case during the Countess's dinner, slipped it into the goose's crop, and gave it to Ryder. He was to take it to the Alpha Inc., where it would go to a man named Henry Baker. Brown said Baker was a nobody, someone who'd never be suspected. Another man, Brown's confederate, I think, would take it from Baker later. I didn't ask how." Holmes's fingers drummed lightly on the arm of his chair. "And your reward? You spoke of wanting more." Cusack's eyes flickered with a mix of shame and defiance. "Brown promised me a share of the jewels, value enough to pay my debts and start anew. I was tired, Mr. Holmes, tired of serving, of scraping by. I thought I could escape. But when Ryder said the goose was lost, I knew we were. Ruined. Brown came to me that night, raging. He said I'd botched it, that I'd pay if the jewel wasn't found. I'd been hiding ever since, praying he'd leave London." Holmes's gaze was unrelenting. "This Silas Brown, where is he now?" "I don't know," she said, her voice breaking. "He spoke of the docks, of ships to the continent. Amsterdam, maybe, or Rotterdam. He said the carbuncle could be sold there, no questions asked. I haven't seen him since the night he threatened me." Holmes rose, his expression grim. "You have been foolish, Miss Cusack, and complicit in a grave crime. But your confession may yet mitigate your fate. Remain here and speak to no one until I return." We left the parlor, Cusack's head bowed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Hargreave, hovering anxiously outside, looked to Holmes for guidance. "Inspector Bradstreet must be informed," Holmes said. "Cusack is to be detained gently until we conclude this matter, and see that John Horner is released at once. He is innocent, as I have said." As we stepped into the cold of the Strand, I turned to Holmes, my mind racing. Cusack's deception runs deeper than Ryder's, but she's still a pawn, isn't she? This Silas Brown, he's the true villain. Holmes nodded, his eyes distant. "Brown is the architect, Watson. A man of cunning who exploits the weak Ryder's debts, Cusack's desperation. The Goose was his masterstroke, a means to smuggle the jewel through innocent hands. But its loss has exposed his scheme, and now he flees. We must find him before he escapes abroad." Back at Baker Street, Holmes dispatched another note to the Baker Street irregulars, urging them to redouble their search for a scarred man near the docks. He then sank into his armchair, the blue carbuncle before him, its glow a silent challenge. "Cusack's deception is laid bare," he said, exhaling a cloud of pipe smoke. "She acted from greed as much as fear, but Brown is the key. Tomorrow we shall hunt him, Watson, and bring this adventure to its close." I retired that night, with the weight of Cusack's confession heavy upon me, her mix of defiance and despair a mirror to the human frailty at the heart of this case. The blue carbuncle, a jewel of unearthly beauty, had woven a web of deceit, and only Holmes's relentless logic could hope to sever its strands. Chapter 9. The Hunt for Silas Brown. The dawn broke over London with a brittle clarity, the winter sun casting a pale, cold light through the thinning fog that clung to the city's edges. In the sitting room at 221B Baker Street, the fire burned low, its embers casting flickering shadows across the blue carbuncle, which lay on Sherlock Holmes's desk like a shard of captured midnight. The confessions of James Ryder and Catherine Cusack had tightened the net around the theft of the jewel, revealing a scheme of cunning and desperation orchestrated by the elusive Silas Brown, the scarred man whose shadow loomed over every thread of this affair. I, Dr. John Watson, felt the weight of the chase pressing upon me as Holmes, his lean frame taut with purpose, prepared to pursue the mastermind who had set this intricate plot in motion. "Watson," said Holmes, as he donned his ulster and adjusted his deerstalker, "today we hunt a fox, a cunning one, who has slipped through London's underbelly with the ease of a spectre. Silas Brown, if that is his true name, is no ordinary thief. His use of Ryder and Cusack, his choice of a Goose as a courier for the carbuncle, speaks of a mind both bold and meticulous. But his plan has unraveled, and he knows it. The docks are our destination, for there he seeks escape." I checked my revolver, a habit born of long association with Holmes's adventures, and nodded. "Cusack said he spoke of Amsterdam or Rotterdam. Can we hope to catch him before he boards a ship?" Holmes's eyes glinted with resolve. "Hope is a poor substitute for action, my dear fellow. The Baker Street irregulars are scouring the wharves, and Brown's scar makes him conspicuous. If he is still in London, we shall have him." We set out into the crisp morning, the streets alive with the clatter of early trade milk carts rattling, newsboys shouting, and the distant whistle of a steamer on the Thames. Holmes had summoned Inspector Bradstreet, who met us at a coffee house near the docks. his sturdy frame bundled against the cold, and his face etched with the weariness of a man burdened by an unresolved case. "Holmes," he said, stirring his coffee, "I've released Horner, as you advised, and Cusack is under watch at the hotel. But this Silas Brown, who is he, and what proof have you?" Holmes's tone was brisk. "Brown is the architect of the theft, Inspector. Ryder and Cusack, driven by debt and fear, were his instruments. He orchestrated the concealment of the blue carbuncle in a Goose, passed through Henry Baker's hands to obscure the trail. Cusack's confession places him at the docks, likely seeking a ship to the continent. We must move swiftly." Bradstreet nodded, though his skepticism lingered. "I have men stationed at the wharves, but the docks are a warren. If he's as clever as you say, he'll be disguised or gone already." Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Clever men make mistakes, Bradstreet, when pressure mounts. His scar is his weakness. It marks him, disguise or no. Come, let us join the hunt." The docks were a chaos of noise and motion, the air thick with the sense of tar, fish, and coal smoke. Ships loomed like great beasts along the quays, their masts piercing the sky, while dockers shouted and cranes groaned under the weight of cargo. Holmes's irregulars, a ragged band of street urchins led by the sharp-eyed Wiggins, awaited us near a warehouse, their faces smudged but eager. "Mr. Holmes," said Wiggins, touching his cap, "we've spotted a tall cove with a scar, left cheek, near the Rotterdam steamer. He's wearing a dark coat, collar up, but the scar's plain as day. Boarded the ship not half an hour ago." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Well done, Wiggins. Lead us to him." We followed the boy through the maze of crates and barrels, Brad's men trailing close behind. The Rotterdam steamer, a hulking vessel with smoke curling from its funnel, was preparing to depart, its gangway crowded with passengers and porters. Holmes scanned the deck, his gaze hawk-like, until he pointed to a tall figure near the rail, his face partially obscured by a high collar but marked by a deep, livid scar on his left cheek. "There," said Holmes, his voice low, "Silas Brown, or whatever he calls himself. Bradstreet, have your men secure the gangway. Watson, with me." We boarded the ship, the deck vibrating beneath our feet as the engines rumbled to life. Brown stood alone, his dark eyes scanning the horizon, a leather valise clutched in one hand. Holmes approached with the calm assurance of a predator closing on its prey. "Mr. Brown," he said, his voice cutting through the din, "or shall I say, the architect of the blue carbuncle's theft. Your flight ends here." Brown's head snapped around, his scar stark against his pale skin. For a moment, his eyes betrayed panic, but he quickly masked it with a sneer. "You've the wrong man, sir. I'm just a traveller, bound for Rotterdam on business." Holmes stepped closer, his presence commanding. "A poor lie, sir. The blue carbuncle, stolen from the Countess of Mercar, was found in a Goose you arranged to smuggle through James Ryder and Catherine Cusack. Both have confessed, and your scar betrays you. Surrender the valise and come quietly." Brown's hand tightened on the valise, his gaze darting to the gangway, now blocked by Bradstreet's men. "You've no proof," he hissed. "A goose. A jewel. Fairy tales. Nothing more." Holmes's smile was cold. "The carbuncle is in my possession, and your accomplices have named you. The game is up, Brown. Resist, and you'll face worse than a cell." For a moment, I thought Brown might bolt, but the sight of Bradstreet's men, their truncheons at the ready, seemed to sap his resolve. He dropped the valise, his shoulders slumping. "I underestimated you," he muttered. "The jewel was To be my fortune, my escape from this wretched city. Bradstreet stepped forward, clapping cuffs on Brown's wrists as his men searched the valise, finding only papers and clothing, no trace of additional loot. Holmes watched, his expression grim. You chose your pawns poorly, Brown. Ryder's fear and Cusack's greed undid your scheme. The Goose was a stroke of genius, but its loss was your downfall. Brown's eyes burned with defiance, though his voice was low. I'd have been halfway to Amsterdam by now, with the carbuncle sold and a new life begun. You think you've won, Holmes, but you've only delayed me. Holmes's gaze was unrelenting. The law will decide your delay, sir. Take him, Bradstreet. As the inspector's men led Brown away, the steamer's whistle sounded, a mournful note that echoed across the docks. Holmes turned to me, his face set but satisfied. The hunt is over, Watson, though the chase was brief. Brown's arrogance led him to linger too long, trusting his plan's complexity to shield him. But no plan survives the chaos of human error. We returned to Baker Street as the sun climbed higher, the city's pulse quickening around us. Holmes sank into his armchair, the blue carbuncle before him, its azure glow a silent testament to the greed it had inspired. Brown is in custody, Ryder and Cusack exposed, he said, lighting his pipe. The jewel will be returned to the Countess, and justice served. Yet I cannot help but wonder at the audacity of it all, a fortune hidden in a goose, a scheme undone by a street scuffle. I sat opposite him, the weight of the adventure settling upon me. And what of Ryder and Cusack? Will they face the full weight of the law? Holmes exhaled a cloud of smoke, his eyes distant. Ryder is a frightened tool, Cusack a servant swayed by greed. Their punishment will be decided by others, but I see little profit in their ruin. Brown was the mind, the hand that pulled the strings. His capture is enough for now. The fire crackled, and the blue carbuncle gleamed, its beauty both a lure and a warning. The hunt for Silas Brown had ended, but the echoes of his scheme lingered, a reminder of the shadows that lurked beneath London's glittering surface. Chapter 10. The Return of the Carbuncle. The pale light of a winter afternoon filtered through the curtains of 2-1B Baker Street, casting a soft glow upon the sitting room where Sherlock Holmes and I sat, the blue carbuncle resting on the table between us. Its azure facets gleamed with an almost unearthly radiance, a silent witness to the tangled web of greed and cunning we had unraveled. The capture of Silas Brown at the docks, the confessions of James Ryder and Catherine Cusack, and the of the innocent John Horner had brought this singular adventure to its close, yet a final act remained. I, Dr. John Watson, felt a quiet satisfaction as Holmes, his lean frame relaxed in his armchair, contemplated the jewel with a mixture of triumph and detachment. Watson, said he, breaking the silence, the blue carbuncle is a curious thing, a bauble that inspires both awe and avarice. Its journey through a goose's crop, across the hands of a disgraced clerk, a fearful attendant, and a scheming maid, is a testament to human folly. Yet now it must return to its rightful owner, and our part in this drama will end. I nodded, my mind turning over the extraordinary chain of events. The Countess of Mercar will be relieved, no doubt, but will you accept her reward? The papers say it's a princely sum. Holmes's lips curved in a faint smile, and he waved a dismissive hand. The pursuit of truth is reward enough, my dear fellow. Gold is a poor substitute for the thrill of the chase, and this case has provided that in abundance. Come, let Us deliver the carbuncle and be done with it. We set out for the Hotel Cosmopolitan, the jewel secured in a velvet-lined box within Holmes's coat pocket. The streets of London were alive with the hum of late afternoon trade, the clatter of hansoms and the cries of vendors mingling in the crisp air. The fog had lifted entirely, and the city seemed to breathe anew, as if cleansed by the resolution of the mystery. At the hotel, Mr. Hargreave greeted us with a mixture of relief and deference, his face no longer creased with the strain of the past days. "Mr. Holmes," he said, ushering us into his office, "the Countess is in her suite, awaiting news. Your success has reached her ears, and she is most eager to see you." We ascended to the third floor, where the Countess of Mercar received us in her lavish sitting room, its silk draperies and polished furniture a stark contrast to the grim undercurrents we had uncovered. She was a striking woman, her dark hair adorned with pearls, her eyes bright with a mix of gratitude and lingering distress. At the sight of the velvet box in Holmes's hand, she rose, her hands clasped before her. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice trembling, "is it true? Have you recovered my carbuncle?" Holmes inclined his head and opened the box, revealing the jewel in all its radiant glory. The Countess gasped, tears welling in her eyes as she took it, her fingers trembling. "Oh, thank heaven," I thought. "It lost forever. Name your reward, sigh. Owe you more than I can say." Holmes's expression remained impassive. "Your gratitude is sufficient, madam. The jewel's return is my purpose, and I require no further recompense. The matter is closed, and I trust you will take greater care with such treasures in the future." The Countess flushed, but her gratitude was undimmed. "You have my word, Mr. Holmes, and my eternal thanks. The scandal has been a trial, but your discretion has spared me further disgrace." We took our leave, Hargreave escorting us to the lobby with profuse thanks. As we stepped into the Strand, the winter sun dipping low, I turned to Holmes. "You might have accepted something, Holmes. The Countess would have paid handsomely." He chuckled, lighting a cigarette as we walked. "Wealth is a burden, Watson, and I have little use for it. The case itself was the prize a puzzle of rare complexity, solved through observation and reason. Let that suffice." Back at Baker Street, the sitting room welcomed us, with its familiar clutter papers strewn across the table, the chemical apparatus glinting in the corner, and the violin case propped against a chair. Holmes lit his pipe and sank into his armchair, the fire casting shadows across his angular face. "A curious affair, Watson," he said, exhaling a cloud of smoke. "A jewel hidden in a goose, a clerk ensnared by chance, a maid swayed by greed, and a mastermind undone by his own ambition. Crime is often simpler than we suppose, yet infinitely strange." I settled opposite him, my notebook open, already, planning to chronicle this adventure. And what of Ryder and Cusack? Will they face trial alongside Brown? Holmes's eyes grew distant. Brown is the true culprit, the mind that wove the scheme. Ryder and Cusack are weak souls, caught in his web. I have spoken to Bradstreet, and he agrees their confessions may lighten their punishment. Ryder's fear and Cusack's remorse will haunt them more than any cell. Let them bear that burden. He reached for his violin, drawing the bow across, the strings in a slow, mournful melody that seemed to echo the case's twists and turns. "Justice, in this instance, is served by the truth," he said. "The carbuncle is restored, Horner freed, and Brown in chains. That is enough." I retired. That night, with the adventure of the blue carbuncle fixed in my mind, its details as vivid as the jewel itself. The firelight faded, and Holmes's violin played on, a fitting close to a case that had begun with a battered hat and a goose, and ended with a triumph of reason over deceit. London slept beyond our windows, its secrets safe for another day, while the blue carbuncle, returned to its owner, gleamed no longer in our hands but in the annals of Holmes's singular genius. The end.